Welcome friends in another session of Linux programming, and in this session we're going to learn AWWK and SED. Those are basically some text processing utility, and they are a bit different because they are some custom made uh, keys, custom made options, which will give us an idea that yes, if we are interested we can as well design our utilities, write down the script for it, and then get it added to the kernel. So AWWK and SED are very popular because of their variety of options what we have over here, and because of that they are very popular and getting used over the normal cat and the other utility, text processing utilities. They also do have integrated filters inside that. We'll go forward and try to analyze what are the filters they do have. So starting with the first one, AWWK. Now the AWWK has this text processing utility, and there were three gentlemen behind that who actually came forward and created this. They are Professor Aho, Professor Winberg, and Professor Cunningham. So the name came from the initials from theirs as A, W, and K. So that's what we call it a AWWK utility. By default, this particular file, whatever the files are getting processed under AWWK, those are expected to be organized in row-wise and column-wise, like a database table, so that the AWWK will work much better on that, right? So it's basically made for structured data. Whenever we have a AWWK file or a file which is made to be processed by AWWK, the file will be usually organized in terms of number of rows and number of columns. However, the columns over here are called elements. So in short, we do have multiple rows and multiple elements. We do have a specific demonstration over here where we'll get to understand how do you have identified which are the rows and which are the elements. Moreover, it makes it ideal for handling a structured set of our data, which is actually came down from a database table or something, right? So we'll go forward and take a look to the demonstration and see how does that actually works out. Well, so here in this case, we already do have a file by the name of AWWK underscore data.txt. If we go forward and use a normal utility for text processing, we'll get to understand that yes, this particular file is actually organized in terms of rows and elements. So the employee number, employee name, department salary, that's one row. 1,000 Jones, department 10, and salary 10,000. Sorry, $1,000. These are my rows. Now, if I specifically see the employee number column, that's basically called as my element. So Jones, Sammy, Mark, Joyce, Jacob, this all comes under the field called ename. Right. Now let's see what are the basic syntaxes we do have and how do you actually go forward and use them. Let us go forward and try seeing that. How do you first write your command? So I'll write down AWWK, put a single quote on, open a curly brace of flower brush, we'll write down print, and we'll say $1. We'll close the brace, we'll put a single quote, and then we'll write down the file name. So you can see that $1 actually means the column number 1, right? So whatever we have in the first column, we'll be getting everything as it is to that. I can as well go forward and print any of the column available as we have got 4 columns. So we'll go forward and say 4. So I'll be actually getting the 4th column printed over here, right? So there are many options over here, like say, for example, if I go forward and say $0, which will be actually printing the complete file, because we have to understand that the first row and the first column, they are numbered as 1. So anything above that, if I have to go forward and mention 0, I'll be getting the complete file available here, right? So these are a few very fundamental options. I can also go forward and try doing print of $1, comma, $2, and we'll go forward and say that. I'll see that yes, it will be actually printing the first and the second column in detail. I also do have multiple options to go forward and print the rows. So let's see how do you go forward and print a row. But before that, once again, we'll like to see that how the actual file look alike. So I'll write cat AWWK underscore data.txt. So this is my complete file. And say for a time instance, I will be able to see if I wanted to see the second row and the second column data, which is Jones over here, how do I do that? So I would like to print the second row and the second column data. So specifically this particular element. So for that, what I have to do is basically, I'll go forward and say AWK -v, and then I would like to print the second row, and then I like to print the second column, and followed by I'll say FNR equal to of I, which means my second row, and then I'd like to actually go forward and print the jth column, right? So which makes in specifically the second row and the second column. And then I have to go forward and mention my file name, AWK underscore data.txt. Okay. I beg your pardon, I have to execute it 1 second. So AWK underscore data. So I can actually go forward and see that it prints the second row and the second column. At the same point of time, if I want only the third row to be printed, I can as well go forward and do that. But for that, what I have to do is basically, I have to go forward and say AWK followed by -v, followed by I is equal to 2, and then followed by, I'll go forward and say FNR equal to I, and then I'll say print $0. And then what happens is, basically, I mentioned the name of the file, and then what I got is over here is like the second row, the complete second row. So that's my second row here. If I wanted to go forward and print my third row, which is actually 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth row here. So I have to go forward and say I is equal to 4. So I'll be getting my data printed over here. Now, there are other options as well, like if I wanted to print everything after my second line, which is this 1000 and then so on. Now, if I wanted to go forward and print my second line onwards the complete data, I as well do have an option for that. So what I have to go forward and do that is, I'll write down AWK followed by single quote in R, which is greater than, I would like to print second row onwards. So I'll be writing 1 here, and then I go forward and say AWK underscore data.txt. So now whatever I do have except the header, I do have everything printed here. Now I can also go forward and start printing something from this employee number 3000, which means I have to skip the first 3. So in that particular case, I'll go forward and say NR, which is greater than 3 and so on. So everything I get it from 3000. Now, even there are options where I have to go forward and choose to print only the third row or only the fourth employee, which is this 4000. That means like I have to go forward and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which is Joyce, only a specific row. So in that particular case, I have to modify my script saying that inner is equal to 5, and then I'll get only that 4000 employee Joyce printed. I can as well print 2 rows in any order, in any specific, not in sequence as well. So in that order, what I have to do, I am choosing to print the top one and the last one. The last one is my 6 and the top one is my 1. So I'll go forward and say in AWK single quote NR is equal to 1, and then I'll mention or NR equal to 6. So what it will print? It will print the first one and the last one. Right, so there are many more other options. I can as well put a filter on this particular case and go forward and find out how does that actually works. But those are the practice matters. You can actually go forward and try out those options in general. Well, after this option, after this, I have got another utility left out, which is called SCD, stands for Stream Editor. It's basically a non-interactive stream editor, which means you have to go forward and keep on saying the things what you wanted to do well in advance before it actually starts. It performs certain operation on specific line of files or on some specific set of inputs. Also, SCD determines which lines of input it will operate from the address range you have to you are actually passing on to that. So once again, here as well, for a specific file, the line starts from 1, and here 0 means actually nothing, unlike AWWK. Now, there are a few options what you can actually go forward and do. To delete one specific line, you have to go forward and mention D. To mention specific line, you have to go forward and say P. And then if you have to replace something, you have to say S and replace, substitute. And then if you have to go forward and mention like insert, you have to go forward and say I. Right? So these are some very basic common options. We'll review that one as well in the demonstration. So let's get it started. We already do have a file called ACD. Inside that, I already do have a file which called acd.txt. So let's see cat acd.txt. So this is my content of that particular file. Let me start over once again fresh. So we'll have one file called acd.txt, and inside that we have something called we are learning Windows. Windows is best. Windows programming is easy, and so on. Right. Now what I wanted to do is basically I wanted to get the third line deleted over here. Right. So to do that, what I basically want is like I'll go forward and say acd followed by a space. And as I wanted to delete the third line, I'll say 3 and I'll be putting D over here. And then I will be going forward and mention acd.txt. Now without that, it's got printed over here, but you must be wondering that does it really delete the line from this particular file or not? To check that, I'll once again go forward and say acd.txt. I'll see that the original file is intact. This is just a presentation, right? So it will be actually removing the very last line. Now, if I wanted to go forward and print something where I'll try to see if at all in line is that contains is, I wanted to print that particular line. So what I'll do is I'll go forward and say acd, I'll say s, say I'll be saying a slash, and then I'll say is, then I wanted to print that, so I'll say /p, and then I'll say acd.txt. So now whatever I do have is like which are the files they are getting repeated over here that actually contains a is, right? So that's how I would like to find it out. Now for a temporary purpose, if I wanted to go forward and replace all these Windows keywords with Linux, so what I have to do, I'll go forward and say acd, and I wanted to substitute that with something called Linux. I'll put a slash over here, and then I'll go forward and say acd.txt. So now whatever I do have is like everywhere wherever Windows was appearing, that is now replaced with Linux. Now, once again, this is just a presentation format. The original file is still unchanged. It's with Windows. But what I can do over here is if I wanted to save as the file replaced all the Windows by Linux, I can actually go forward and create a new file out of it. How do I do that? I'll go forward and put a redirector operator, which is called the navigator one sometimes, and I'll say acd1.txt. And then what happens if I go forward and try seeing what is inside acd1.txt, I'll see that the complete file is actually changed with Linux. However, the original file is once again only with Windows, right? So you can actually save as the output of a file inside another file altogether, right? Which is pretty much interesting. Now, if I wanted to go forward and add a new line to this existing file, so let's see how do I do that, right? So what I have to do, say for example, at the fourth line or at the second line, which will replace the existing second line, I'll go forward and add a specific line over here. So what happens for that? I'll try to add some line at the very fourth line. So I'll say acd space. I would like to add it at the fourth line. And what I'm gonna add it is Linux learning sessions. And then what I'm gonna do is once again, close that and go forward and mention my file name. And I hit enter over here. Well, there is a little permission issues with that particular file. So it's not really accomplishing right now, but however, that's the very same command. right? Now, once again, if I wanted to also go forward and figure out like how the other options works over here, I can actually read out the SCD file, open up the SCD file, and perform the other operations on that as well, right? So that's pretty much all about the SCD option. These are the two text processing utilities, whatever you do have in total. And now you can actually pause forward for the video and answer the questions very quickly. And once again, whenever you be in class, you can ask for the correct answers to that. Well, that's pretty much all over it. The next sessions will be shell scripting, where the majority of the efforts from the Linux is actually kept in, and this session is also very much focused on that. So that's gonna be very, very interesting for all of us. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this, as it's helpful for you to find out like if at all any specific question got asked over here, you can find out the answers, or if at all a new video is posted, you'll be getting a notifications on that. So please like and subscribe to this video.